There are moments when you're walking through life, and though your feet are still moving, your soul has stopped somewhere behind you. You're surrounded by noise, flooded by images, distracted by endless options, and yet none of it reaches that silent ache in the center of your chest. That's not just sadness, that's not boredom, that's the voice of your spirit trying to whisper over the volume of the world, begging you to pay attention. We live in an age where you can know everything and still understand nothing, where you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. The wandering spirit is not broken, it is alert. It is the part of you that refuses to settle for shallow living, and if you feel it stirring, don't ignore it. That whisper is your map. Wandering does not mean weak. It means you are awake enough to know that what surrounds you isn't enough. The tragedy is not that people are lost, but that they've stopped looking. If you feel unsettled, unsure, like you're floating without a place to land, then your spirit is telling you the old coordinates no longer work. The values that once defined you may have eroded, the goals you chase might not be your own. And so you drift, not because you're lazy or directionless, but because the structures you once trusted have collapsed. To admit that, to see it clearly, is the beginning of truth. You must now build from within what the world failed to give you. In the still moments, in the quiet nights, when you feel most alone, that's when the whisper gets loudest. But most people fill that silence with noise, afraid of what they might hear. Your wandering spirit doesn't want more distraction. It wants direction, but it speaks in symbols, images, subtle nudges, so you must learn to listen, put away the screen, turn off the algorithm, get back into relationship with your own thoughts. It's there, beneath the surface chatter, that the real questions emerge. Who are you really? What are you avoiding? And what part of you still wants to be redeemed? The wandering spirit needs a home, not just emotionally, but practically. If you don't give yourself order, life will give you disorder. You cannot heal or grow in a hurricane. Clean your space, discipline your routine, speak truthfully, especially when it costs you. Each act of structure is a stake in the ground, a declaration that you are not simply passing through this life, but planting roots within it. Stability is not the enemy of the spirit. It is the soil it needs to grow. Stop waiting for clarity to strike. Create it, brick by brick, with every deliberate choice. No soul survives long without an aim. If you don't choose your purpose, the world will choose one for you, and it will be cheap money, applause, distraction, comfort. These are hollow gods, and they demand everything in return for nothing that lasts. The wandering spirit only rests when it aims upward, toward the sacred, the eternal, the deeply meaningful. This doesn't require religion. It requires reverence. Live in service of something higher than yourself. Take on responsibility that scares you. Speak for those who can't. Build something that outlives your name. That's when your steps begin to have weight again. That's when wandering becomes pilgrimage. You're not aimless. You're unanchored. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Being aimless implies apathy, laziness, or a lack of desire. But if you're honest with yourself, that's not what you're experiencing. You feel something. You want something, but you don't know what it is or how to reach it. It slips through your fingers like smoke. The world might label you as unmotivated or lost, but deep down you know that's not accurate. What you're actually experiencing is the breakdown of the map you were taught to follow. The old landmarks, grades, careers, approval, appearances. They don't seem to lead anywhere meaningful anymore. And so you find yourself wandering, not because you're broken, but because what you were told to build your life on turned out to be too shallow to hold the weight of your soul. This kind of spiritual disorientation often shows up after you've done everything right. You tried to be good, tried to fit in, tried to hit the milestones, but something in you didn't arrive at the finish line feeling fulfilled. It arrived feeling numb. That's when the wandering begins. You're no longer tethered to a story that makes sense. You wake up wondering what all of this is for. You begin to see through the empty routines, the performative smiles, the shallow dopamine rush of digital praise, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. But seeing through illusion doesn't yet offer you clarity. It just leaves you suspended, aware of what you don't want, but unsure of what's next. And this is dangerous territory, because the human spirit cannot survive without direction. Without an aim, the soul begins to fragment, anxiety increases, depression seeps in, you begin to question your worth not because you are worthless, but because no one taught you how to build your own foundation. You were handed prefabricated ideals and told to obey, but those ideals weren't designed for the complexity of your inner life. They weren't deep enough. They didn't account for the grief you've carried, the beauty you long for, or the meaning your soul demands. That's why you're not aimless. You're far too sensitive and aware for that. You're unanchored, floating between worlds, trying to find something worth holding onto, and recognizing that truth is not weakness. It's the beginning of becoming someone who no longer borrows a story, but writes one worth living. Silence often feels like a void, an emptiness we instinctively try to fill. In today's world where stimulation is constant and distraction is marketed as comfort, silence has become something we fear. We turn on noise the moment we wake up, fill our pockets with endless scrolling, and drown out the stillness with entertainment, notifications, and commentary. But the wandering spirit does not live in the noise. It hides in the quiet, in those rare moments when everything else fades and we are left with only ourselves. That stillness, that uncomfortable pause, is not a gap to be filled. It's a space to be listened to. And if we stop running long enough to hear it, we may discover it was never silence at all. It was instruction. In the quiet, our deepest questions emerge, the ones we've been avoiding, not the superficial questions like what should I do this weekend, or what do people think of me, but the haunting, meaningful ones. Am I becoming who I'm meant to be? What do I actually believe? Why does this pain still follow me? These questions don't shout, they whisper, and they only reveal themselves when we choose to meet the silence without flinching. This is the language of the soul, not fast, not loud, but layered with truth. And while the answers may not come immediately, the act of listening itself changes you. It builds a new kind of awareness, a sensitivity to the internal compass most people have buried under years of artificial noise. The silence also reveals the gap between who we pretend to be and who we truly are. Without the performance, without the masks we wear for approval, we are exposed. And though that exposure is terrifying, it is also liberating. Because only in that vulnerability can real transformation begin. When you sit in silence long enough, patterns begin to show. The way you avoid responsibility, the way you seek comfort over courage, the way you deflect truth with humor or overthinking, all of it surfaces. The wandering spirit is not trying to destroy you with guilt. It's trying to bring you back to authenticity. And authenticity is never found in chaos. It's carved out of deliberate, difficult quiet. So if your life feels noisy but hollow, if your days are full but your soul feels starved, then the silence is not your enemy, it's your teacher. The whispers within it are not meaningless echoes. They are messages from the deepest part of who you are, asking to be heard, not ignored. Most people will never hear them because they're too afraid to stop and listen, but if you do, if you truly pay attention, the silence will speak, and what it tells you might just be the thing that guides your wandering spirit home. Chaos is not simply the random clutter on your desk or the missed appointments crowding your calendar. It is a gravitational force that grows stronger each time you postpone action, each time you promise yourself tomorrow, and then spend tomorrow doing nothing of consequence. Left unchecked, it expands quietly, seeping into your relationships, distorting your sense of time, and convincing you that all structure is oppression. That is why the wandering spirit, yearning for meaning yet terrified of confinement, must choose structure long before collapse arrives. Structure is not a prison, it is a scaffold. It gives the formless energy of your desires a place to crystallize into competence. When you establish even the smallest routines, you declare to the universe, and to your own fragmented psyche, that you are willing to become the architect of your existence rather than the casualty of it. Start by staking out the most immediate territory, your physical environment. A room in disarray whispers constantly that nothing is settled, that disorder is the natural state. Put every object in its place. Decide which possessions genuinely serve your aims and which merely distract you. This single act of clarifying space trains the nervous system to associate surroundings with intentionality, transforming a chaotic backdrop into a silent ally. From there, shift to the architecture of time. Assign waking moments to tasks instead of allowing tasks to devour whatever moments happen to remain. Use a calendar as more than a reminder of obligations. Treat it as a treaty between the impulsive self that wants comfort and the future self that demands progress. The calendar becomes a moral document if you schedule writing at 7 a.m. and actually sit down to write. You have kept a promise to the only person who can never truly leave you, yourself. As you cultivate order externally, establish internal rituals that prime the mind for resilience. A few minutes of deliberate breathing each morning signals the body that it is safe to engage the day. A nightly review of accomplishments, however small, inoculates you against the lie that your efforts are meaningless. These practices anchor you when external storms arrive. Without them, you will default to primitive reflexes, escape, distraction, self-pity, because there is no practiced alternative. Discipline is muscle memory for the soul. Finally, let structure refine your speech. Resolve to articulate what you think before speaking, to say what you mean without adornment. Precise language imposes order on thought. Sloppy words fertilize confusion. When you speak clearly, you illuminate your path for others, and their clarity returns to you as mutual coherence. In time, a network of truthful conversations forms the social framework that supports your emerging identity. Each deliberate act, tidying a workspace, blocking a time slot, completing a ritual, uttering an exact sentence, lays another plank across the chasm of chaos. Choose enough of these acts, and the bridge holds your weight. Neglect them, and the gulf widens until it swallows everything unanchored, including the wandering spirit that might have found its way had it only embraced the courage to build. There is an ancient truth, often buried beneath modern noise. If you do not aim your life at something sacred, you will inevitably serve something hollow. Human beings cannot exist in a vacuum of meaning. If you do not choose what to live for, something else will choose it for you, and it won't be worthy of your spirit. The wandering soul is not just lost because it has no direction. It is often lost because it is chasing things that are too small to hold its weight. Fame, money, social validation, comfort, these are weak gods. They glitter brightly but crumble under pressure. They promise fulfillment, but they only feed the ego, not the soul, and a starved soul will always wander, no matter how much success the world sees on the surface. You need a burden that matters, not just any task, not a checklist, not a corporate target or a social performance, but a purpose that confronts you with your potential and dares you to live up to it. It must stretch you beyond comfort and force you to bring forth something from yourself that didn't exist yesterday. This is not about perfection. It is about growth. The aim must be oriented upward. That doesn't mean you have to adopt religion or blindly follow tradition, but it does mean you must live with reverence. You must orient yourself towards something that transcends your immediate gratification. That's where purpose is forged, in the decision to serve something higher than your own pleasure or convenience. This kind of sacred responsibility might be as personal as becoming a reliable parent, as creative as building something that will outlive your name, or as quiet and noble as choosing to speak the truth in a world addicted to lies. Whatever it is, it should frighten you a little, not because it's dangerous, but because it demands everything, and in that demand you will find who you really are, not the surface version, not the edited one, but the true self, capable of bearing weight and becoming someone others can lean on. That is what ends the wandering, not certainty, not achievement, but commitment. When you commit to something sacred, you stop chasing approval and start generating meaning. The days begin to matter again. Time is no longer something to kill, it becomes something to honor. That shift changes everything, because when your aim is worthy, you no longer ask, "What is the point of my life?" Instead, you wake up each day asking, "How can I serve it better?" And that is how the wandering ends, not with applause, not with ease, but with a quiet, powerful realization. Your spirit was never lost, only waiting for something worth devoting itself to. When a soul begins to wander, it's not because it has failed, it's because it has woken up. Woken up to the artificiality, the noise, the routines that once seemed to offer meaning but now feel hollow. This wandering isn't a detour, it's a summons, a call to reevaluate the story you've been living, the values you've inherited, and the path you've blindly followed. And though it feels disorienting, it is one of the most honest stages of life. It's where pretense dies and the truth begins to flicker, dim but steady in the silence. This is not the end of your journey. This is the moment it truly begins, to listen to that inner whisper, the one that stirs when the world grows quiet, is to begin reclaiming your sovereignty. The wandering spirit isn't seeking escape, it's seeking alignment. And that alignment starts not with grand declarations, but with the smallest acts of self-respect, cleaning your space, honoring your time, speaking with precision. These things seem insignificant, even boring, in a world obsessed with spectacle. But they are the foundation of all lasting change. They tell the truth not just to the world, but to yourself, that you are not aimless, that you are not a victim of chaos, that you are becoming someone capable of facing reality with open eyes and a steady hand. And once you begin to move with intention, once you start to choose discipline over distraction, the fog begins to lift. You remember that the silence you feared was actually your greatest teacher, that structure was never your enemy, it was the ground beneath your feet. And that the aimless drifting you once mistook for failure was in fact a sacred searching, a process of peeling back the noise until you found a question raw and true enough to live for. And now, standing at the edge of that question, you realize you have the power to build. Not from borrowed ideas, not from inherited blueprints, but from something authentic, something forged in the fire of your own searching. So now the call is clear. Aim higher. Choose a responsibility large enough to demand your full presence. Let it humble you, let it shape you, because in carrying something greater than yourself, you finally transcend yourself. That's where peace lies, not in freedom from the burden, but in the dignity of bearing it. The wandering ends the moment you decide that your life is not a question to answer, but a purpose to fulfill. That decision doesn't just give you direction, it gives you back to yourself, and that, more than anything, is what you've been searching for all along. Thank you for trusting me to help bring this powerful message to life. Every line we created together wasn't just content, it was crafted with care to speak directly to the hearts of those who need it most. Your commitment to sharing meaningful, soul-stirring truth is rare and deeply needed in today's world. As you upload and share this video, know that you're not just releasing a speech, you're releasing a spark. A spark that might light the path for someone wandering in silence. Stay bold in your mission, stay true to your voice, and never doubt the ripple effect your words can create. Wishing you strength, clarity, and continued purpose on this creative journey. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.